Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on June 16, 2025. This meeting included comments and discussion about funding consultants for city-owned parking decks at a private development, removing a requirement that neighbors receive notification about land divisions, approving a green rental housing ordinance of requirements for rental units, dissolving the Environmental and Energy Commissions to create a Sustainability Commission, rezoning properties at Scioto Church and Ann Arbor Saline Roads, removing a requirement for public hearings around development decisions, repealing the requirement that developers of larger projects host a public meeting for near neighbors, and purchasing an easement from Woodbury Gardens for a sewer lift station. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on June 16, 2025. There was one split vote on the consulting contract for city-owned parking decks at a private development. You can find detailed information about this meeting at A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included an update from Matt Carpenter of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority.
Us and the DDA have been working on opportunities on 4th Avenue. We were recently awarded a $400,000 grant, the two of us, by MDOT for the reconstruction of 4th Avenue. Lots of good pedestrian and street amenities, as well as some transit amenities in there as well.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for a little over 50 minutes. 9 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 4 people spoke to topics on the agenda. This week, the consent agenda included 23 items and expenditures of over $7.6 million. 1 item was pulled for discussion. Council considered an expense of $100,000 to fund analysis and due diligence for city-owned parking decks at a private development. A project called Arbor South is planned for a location at State and Eisenhower, just north of Briarwood Mall. Local developer Oxford Companies has asked the city to buy land and pay for the construction of 3 parking decks to support Arbor South. At a work session in November 2024, Council discussed the plan. At that time, staff estimated a total city investment of $104 million. 2 months later, that estimate grew significantly. In January 2025, staff projected that the city would commit a total of $146 million toward parking decks at Arbor South. A staff memo explains that the city has already spent $75,000 on consultants doing analysis and due diligence for the deal. This week, Council considered spending an additional $100,000 on consultants, renewing another year of services. In discussion, only 1 council member offered comment.
What is being proposed is for the city to participate in the project by building parking garages that will wind up hoovering up the additional tax revenue to pay off these garages for the next 30 years.
No one else spoke in support or opposition. The consulting contract was approved in a split vote. Council considered an ordinance amendment that will remove a requirement for notification to near neighbors when a property owner plans to subdivide land. Currently, when a property owner applies for a land division, neighbors within 300 feet are notified by mail. These land divisions are approved administratively, but the notice invites residents to reach out to city staff and the Planning Commission to learn more about what is proposed. Amendments will remove the requirement that near neighbors within 300 feet be notified of a land division. This week, a former member of the City Planning Commission spoke to the issue during a public hearing.
It is really, really important that we consider that we keep public input in as much as possible. I would say that whatever changes that you make sure that whoever participates has input, and rather than have a top-down process. I think that's where we're moving these days, and that's not a good thing.
Council discussed the ordinance amendment for about 3 minutes.
If we approve this ordinance, it does not deprive anyone of meaningful participation in a decision. They are entirely administrative decisions. So this ordinance change proposes to remove notification of land division applications to property owners and residents within 300 feet of the boundary of the property.
In March, this change was considered at the Planning Commission. A public commenter explained why the notification was helpful.
I'm going to speak on behalf of one of my neighbors. She received the postcard And so she was able to call the city, find out what was going on, find the owner, figure out what the plan was. And that way, when the tree company arrived to cut down the 200-year-old trees and bulldoze everything else, for days on end, right next to her house in her backyard, she wasn't surprised. These seemingly innocuous, useless notices, they give people a heads up.
This week, Council Liaison to the Planning Commission, Lisa Dish, emphasized the burden of these notices.
I view this as a simple change, and one that I support, and one that follows from our direction not to overly burden with administrative requirements, or rather with notice requirements, administrative decisions.
The ordinance change was approved unanimously. Council considered an ordinance that will require landlords to meet certain standards for sustainability. During a public hearing, commenters, mostly realtors and landlords, raised concerns.
I'm here to implore you to implement the same strategies that made the similar program successful in Boulder, Colorado. We feel that being more specific and including a wider range of efficiency levels and points, please.
I'm concerned about the timeline for compliance, the complexity of the scoring, and I would ask the council to reconsider the timeline for compliance.
I am very concerned about the timeline for implementing all of these changes. I want to urge council to consider the real financial and logistical constraints that small properties face. Every dollar spent on upgrades has an immediate and personal impact on them. That's why a longer phased timeline for compliance would make a meaningful difference.
I will guarantee you that if this goes through and homeowners have to put thousands of dollars into the point system, the rental rates are going to increase.
Rents will go up, not because landlords are gouging tenants, but because they're scrambling to comply with a fast-moving, complicated new mandate.
That's why I'm asking you to be absolutely sure that this green rental housing ordinance won't raise rents before you vote it into law, because if it does even a little, it could have real lasting consequences to the people trying to build a life here.
Unlike large corporate landlords, we don't have dozens of or hundreds of other units to spread this cost around. Every dollar we have to spend on compliance is a dollar that either comes out of our pockets or gets passed on to the tenant. This ordinance actually favors the large landlords who have the scale and resources to absorb these costs much more easily.
I would like to see a stronger green rental housing ordinance that actually did mandate electrification, stronger energy efficiency standards, and so forth. This isn't it, and I would like to see some protection for tenants, but I don't think the burden on the landlords is real. Nevertheless, the perception is otherwise, and I think tenants need to be protected.
Council discussed the new ordinance for about 20 minutes.
The conversation has been robust and has included extensive consultation with private stakeholders, including renters and landlords of various property sizes.
This green rental housing ordinance, I believe, advances our commitment to carbon neutrality while also improving the day-to-day lives of renters in our city.
You get more than 10% of the points, more than 10% of your way there, 8 points, simply by completing an assessment and having an improvement plan.
Staff offered some explanation about the point values described in the ordinance.
So if you had something that dropped your emissions by 30%, it gets 30 points on the checklist. But we did acknowledge that there are plenty of things out there that do impact our sustainability, do impact the health and safety, and just the general comfort of people living in a home. And so we established a standard scoring system throughout.
Council Liaison to the Renters Commission, Cynthia Harrison, offered qualified support.
So while it's technically accurate to say the ordinance itself doesn't raise rent, that doesn't reflect what people on the ground may experience. I wouldn't be voting yes tonight if I didn't have confidence that the Office of Sustainability and Innovations will continue exploring and implementing programs to support compliance, programs that can help reduce financial strain and protect affordability as we move forward.
The Green Rental Housing Ordinance was approved unanimously. Council then considered an ordinance amendment that will eliminate 2 city commissions and replace them with a sustainability commission. The Environmental and Energy Commissions include appointed members of the community who have historically had autonomy to set goals and policy as advisory boards to City Council. That autonomy is removed in the new ordinance. The terms of a new commission remove virtually all the commission functions to develop and recommend policy, as well as hold public hearings. A new Sustainability Commission will be directed by city staff. Staff will assign commissioners a work plan. During a public hearing, a commenter expressed concerns.
The commission will be accountable to staff instead of staff acting to support the commission solely. I think this is a bad idea because the new commission will no longer set its own agenda. Real change comes from below, from malcontents like me, activists, and grassroots organizations. With all due respect, real change usually doesn't come from elected officials or professional staff. I've heard that staff has asked the commissioners not to draft any more ordinances. Staff will take care of that.
Earlier in the evening, a member of the Environmental Commission drew attention to one of the commission's last official acts.
I'm asking you to prove your environmental credibility by following the recommendation of the Environmental Commission's resolution that was passed unanimously on May 22nd. We recommended that the Council direct the Planning Commission to consider the inclusion of a set of established and updated natural features policies, along with other existing plans that are being incorporated in the comprehensive plan. Don't exclude natural features from the comprehensive plan. It's essential. The Commission's goals and actions are intended to support the health and welfare of the community in the future. We must use creative strategies to retain the green infrastructure that supports life. We can't replace existing natural features. Once they're gone, they're gone. They cannot be recreated. We provided Council with a roadmap for including natural features in the comprehensive plan. It's up to you to take action.
That resolution could have been considered and voted on by City Council if Commission liaisons John Malik or Jen Cornell had put it on the agenda. They did not. This week, the resolution was buried on page 11 among communications and meeting minutes. Council discussed dissolution of the commissions for about 5 minutes.
Nothing about this new commission actually prohibits innovation by its commissioners.
I've seen the commissions evolve from sort of more places of dialogue and now more towards working towards sort of advising on the real work that we're doing.
And I think there's still plenty of opportunity for residents to come to those commissions to share ideas.
Council voted unanimously to dissolve the Energy and Environmental Commissions in order to create a staff-led Sustainability Commission. Council then considered a rezoning of township islands recently annexed into the city. Vacant lots at Scioto Church Road and Ann Arbor City Road will be zoned R4E, multifamily with conditions. Developer Robertson Homes is planning a project of 75 townhomes. Councilmember Lisa Dish described the project.
So rezoning will prepare the way for 75 townhome for-sale residential units in 12 three-story buildings with garages underneath and a rooftop living area. The site plan proposes to provide 49% of site area as open space, which is just under the minimum of 50% open space, and we can feel okay about losing 1% because this is close to parks and that's not much.
The rezoning was approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, it will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered ordinance changes to remove requirements for public hearings ahead of decisions around development. Proposed amendments eliminate public hearings for multiple categories of site plan, rezoning, and land divisions considered by the City Planning Commission. Amendments also eliminate public hearings at City Council for site plans, including wetland use permits. A staff report explains that public notice and public hearings that currently happen will no longer be required. Additionally, development plans will no longer be available at City Hall for viewing, but must be accessed via online systems. Council discussed the change with help from staff.
Under the proposed ordinance amendments, site plans would no longer be noticed in the paper of record, nor would notice be mailed to property owners and residents in 300 feet of the subject property.
The main change that's made here is that we reserve public hearings for decisions on projects and changes to the development code wait a minute, sorry, I don't want to say that. for decisions on projects that involve discretion.
The changes were approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, they will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered more ordinance changes, removing a requirement that developers host public engagement meetings prior to submitting plans to the city. Developers are currently required to engage local residents when they plan a project of particularly large size and scale. They must send postcards to residents within 1,000 feet and invite them to a meeting to offer information and answer questions about what is planned. This must occur early on in the process. Proposed amendments would remove this requirement for all projects except for those that are subject to a public hearing before the City Planning Commission. Moments before discussion of this amendment, Council voted unanimously to reduce the number of developments subject to public hearings at the City Planning Commission. The policy requiring these public engagement meetings was implemented in 2008. Staff explained it at the time.
Citizens will learn earlier in the process rather than just 2 weeks before the public hearing is scheduled, so much earlier in the process, actually.
Council members in 2008 had this to say.
If it's a significant development that could have an impact on existing neighborhoods and surrounding properties, this involvement will take place before the developer begins working with Planning Department. Listening to the neighbors and listening from their experiences with traffic snarls, stormwater issues, parking congestion, and other infrastructure concerns can enable developers to design new projects that fit existing neighborhoods in size, scale, mass, impervious surface, and impact on the environment. Listening to the neighbors, really listening, can also help with neighborhood buy-in.
It's been my experience that when the public is allowed input early in the process, it generally has made for a more constructive and positive outcome.
The more people who have a voice in government, the stronger government is and much more effective.
This week, staff explained that moving forward, the public will be notified only after the developer has already generated detailed plans for review by the city.
It would require that meeting be noticed and held within 45 days of notice by the city that we have accepted a project for review. That means that we've deemed it complete with the required information, that we can not only start that process, but share that information with the public with the benefit of all that information.
Council praised the change, emphasizing that the city should review developments before residents have the opportunity to offer feedback.
Residents are getting notified about a potential development before the city's even seen it. And so in some cases, getting to these meetings very fired up, ready to send their feedback to us, City Council, when staff hasn't even had a chance to review it.
The ordinance change was approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, it will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered the purchase of an easement at Woodbury Gardens for a water main loop and sewer lift station to improve water quality at South and Kohler. A resolution directs city staff to negotiate payment for the easement's appraised value or begin condemnation procedures. That appraisal has apparently occurred, but the resolution does not identify the amount. Earlier in the evening, a public commenter offered feedback.
What I would like to ask is that in addition to the utility easement you're getting, that you would kindly look into getting about a 10-foot wide pedestrian easement along there.
Council and staff responded.
I was just curious if staff is here to be able to comment on the opportunities this easement might be able to provide for enhanced pedestrian connectivity in that neighborhood.
That would require going back to the drawing board because the current appraisals are limited to a utility easement, which it would just be a whole separate, different kind of project and easement.
The resolution directing the purchase of an easement was approved unanimously. Without discussion, Council approved 2 contracts for legal services that will support a sustainable energy utility and other work of the Sustainability Department. Council went into closed session for nearly an hour to discuss a purchase of real estate and a confidential legal memo. After the closed session, Councilmember Malik offered a comment about the resolution from the Environmental Commission.
The resolution has a resolve clause that is several pages in length and is definitely worth a read. I'd like to formally request Administrator Dohoney, please submit this resolution, E1, on our agenda tonight to the Planning Commission for consideration. Thank you.
That is not how Council directs the City Administrator to act. Council rules are clear. Action related to the clerk's report requires a resolution and a vote of council. Such a resolution should have been put in writing ahead of the meeting. The council meeting adjourned just after 10:30 p.m. without any further public comment. For more information about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
So we care what people think. We care for them to come and express to us something that they don't like because it's in our code, and maybe we should think about changing our code. That's all really important, but it's important that people understand what are the limits of our authority and discretion, because otherwise miscommunications and unhappiness happens that we don't have any power over.